Good morning, everybody. Bore da. It's a great pleasure, if not a little scary, to be speaking at the Do Lectures. I have been to the Do Lectures before. In a previous life, I was Director of Marketing at the Welsh Government. And perhaps one of the best decisions or best things I ever did was I made the case for the Welsh Government to put some funding into the Do Lectures to get it off the ground. And it was a bit of a tough ask because I had to get this money from a fund called the Major Events Fund, and trying to tell people that an event of 100 people was a major event was a bit of a tough ask. But I always felt that it would help to build the reputation of Wales, and it certainly has done, with now Do exported around the world. So I think that was one of the most wise decisions I ever took. But when I was sat in the audience, I could never imagine that I would actually be speaking on the stage, because I was a civil servant, and do and civil service don't exactly go together. I felt I was better suited to the don't lectures, or maybe the can't lectures. But then on the other hand, I'm from a part of Wales, the South Wales Valleys, actually the same area that Dave Hyatt's from. And actually do is a favourite word there, because we speak English in a Welsh dialect called Wenglish. And do is a favourite word. In fact, we're double doers, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So my mother used to say to me when I was growing up, "Your father do like a drink. He'd go to the pub. He do it every night." So the do is a construction in Wenglish that I think maybe I was more appropriate to speak here. So now I'm no longer a civil servant. I'm a partner in a horrible word, a brand consultancy. We've got offices in London, New York, and Cardiff. And the truth be known, the only reason I joined this company was I always wanted a business card that had London, New York, and Cardiff on it. That is the only reason that I joined them. Actually, it's a completely different world from working in government, as you can imagine. The culture is entirely different. And I noticed that as soon as I joined the company, because when you go for a job in the civil service, you have to go through these boring procedures, you have to write out all your competencies and everything. And it was nothing like that when I was asked to join Heavenly. They just had 3 words that they try and use for the people that should work in the company, and that was energy-giving, enterprising, and engaging. And after engaging, it said, the kind of person you'd like to sit to next on a plane, worldly wise, fun, and witty. And I showed this to my wife, and she said, they haven't met you, have they? But somehow I got the job. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about places and marketing and branding. And why are so many places turning to marketing and branding? Well, because it's very, very competitive. There are 500 regions in Europe. There are over 105,000 towns. And they're all competing for talent, for events, for inward investment, for tourists. It's as competitive as any other industry sector that you can imagine. And I kind of learned this a long time ago. Perhaps more than anything else, they're looking for attention. Places demand attention. They want to be talked about. They want to be on the map. My first ever visit overseas as marketing director of the Wales Tourist Board at the time was to New York. And I was really, really excited. You know, I was really thrilled to be able to go and promote my country in the States. And I landed at JFK Airport, got into the taxi going down to Manhattan. And the taxi driver turned around to me and he said, "Hey, bud, what do you do?" I said, "Oh, I promote Wales." He said, "Great animals. Do all you can to save them." And I kind of knew I had a bit of a challenge on my hands. And when I told that story at an event, something like this, a few years ago, somebody said to me, he said, "You know, I had very similar experience." And this person worked for Welsh food promotions. And they were at an event in New York as well. And one of the stands was cheese from Wales. And a guy came up and said, "How do you milk a whale?" You know, I think the only time that Wales was ever talked about in the news and in the media was when some natural disaster had happened somewhere in the world. So if there was a bushfire in Australia, remarkably, it always covered an area the size of Wales. And if there was a flood in India, again, amazingly covered an area the size of Wales. And then there was some other incident, I can't remember what it was, maybe an oil slick somewhere. It covered a much smaller area. So I thought, they're not going to use Wales now, are they? Maybe they'll use Northern Ireland or something. And no, this covered an area half the size of Wales. So I actually thought that, my role in life was to ensure that Wales was talked about for something other than a natural disaster. Can a place really be a brand? Places are, you're born in places, you grow up there, you have a natural attachment to places. And unfortunately, a lot of places just think of brands as these things, as these logos. But if you think about it, in a place you have a language, a culture, values, a personality, unique stories, all of the things that you pay brand consultancies ridiculous sums of money to tell you about. So in that sense, a place is in some ways a brand. Maybe a brand you can't control, but a brand nevertheless. But when you talk to, I don't know if you can see this at the back, but when you talk to politicians, they don't like the word branding, and I do think there are issues with it in terms of what we're trying to do. So words like reputation are often used. Politicians understand that. They understand it's your reputation, what people say about you when you're not there. And the reputation of a country is complex. It can be both positive and negative at the same time, and all of these things influence the reputation of a country. And reputation has become incredibly important for places these days. This guy, Casper Nielsen, says, destinations that identify and devote proper resources to building a strong reputation, attract more tourists, blah, blah, blah. And they've even now started to measure the reputation of cities. And they measure them according to these criteria. Does anybody want to hazard a guess which cities in the world might be in the top 5 when it comes to reputation?
St. David's.
It used to be, and then it got a bit too big. Vancouver is in there, and it's number 1. Well done. Sydney's in there, it's number 3. Is number 4. You're good at this. Stockholm is not in there.
San Francisco.
No. Vienna is number 2, and Oslo is, so I should have done this when I was doing that, and Oslo is there. Just want to, so reputation is really important. And one of the things that, this affects not just destinations, it affects every form of brand. But I guess one of the biggest changes in the last 10 years is the fact that we are now all creators and not just consumers. The internet has given us the opportunity to be critics, to be filmmakers, to be entrepreneurs. When I was in Welsh government and I couldn't be commercial, one of the things I did was I set up an eBay business. It has given everybody an opportunity to contribute and be creators. And when, I think it was in 1996, in Time magazine, they said the person of the year is you. And basically what they were saying was the internet has given you the opportunity to be influential. When they wrote that, 6% of us contributed information on the web. Last year, it was nearly 80%. So any brand which, and certainly when it comes to places, you have to harness the creativity of the people that live in your place. Because you're not going to change your reputation through advertising or conventional means. You only change your reputation if the people that you're working on behalf of believe in what you're doing. And the other thing, I guess, is that the internet has made people question everything. They bypass official institutions, they bypass tourist board information, and they get their views on a place, and indeed any other aspect of life, from their networks, their communities. So one of the things when we're now talking to other places is we try and ensure that whatever we come up with really resonates with the people that live in the place, because ultimately it will fail. When it comes to places, if you look at the marketing and advertising from places, you wouldn't believe that you'd think that everywhere is the same. But every place in the world is unique. Unique is a kind of completely overused word, but it's true. Every place in the world is unique. The challenge is to identify the things, as I said earlier, the stories, the personality, the values, the points of interest that really make them different. And be honest. Why is it that when we read brochures, every view is unsurpassed or every facility is world class? You have to be honest in terms of what you're saying about your place. Because these days, people will find out very quickly what the truth is, and they are prepared to tell everybody else. And in truth, a place brand, indeed any brand, I guess, is about experiences. And unless we can influence the way in which people experience a place, then I guess we're not doing our job. If it's just about communications, it simply isn't going to work, because it's people's experiences of a place that really make the difference. And lastly, when we're looking at places, touching on a point I made earlier, the solid foundation you have to build on is a pride and a belief of the people that live there about what you're doing. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made when I started out in this was I did all the research about what the marketplace wanted, created a campaign which we were really proud of, but it didn't resonate with the people who lived in Wales, and so therefore it didn't work as well as it might. But you know, what really disappoints me is when places go through all this analysis, they try and identify the things that make them special, they try and talk about, identify the audiences that they want to talk to, and then they can't make up their mind about what they want to be. So they become the land of contrasts. This is the cardinal sin of destination marketing. Any country, live the life. You pick up any brochure, they're always talking about those kind of things. And if you don't believe me, go to Google and put in land of contrasts. You come up with 594,000 examples, some great ones. Guinea, the Switzerland of Africa, is a land of contrast. Kansas is a land of contrast. The Middle East, and so on. Land of contrast is the challenger, is the cardinal sin. A few years ago, I was, many years ago actually, I was sat in a presentation when I was in the Wales Tourist Board, and somebody said to me, he said, Wales is a challenger brand. And I went, yes! I didn't have a clue what he was talking about, but it sounded brilliant. And they actually sent me a book by a guy called Adam Morgan, which was all about challenger brands. And this gave me a kind of vocabulary to say the kind of things that I always believed anyway. And we started doing some things that were very different, or indeed, we'd already been doing some things that were very different. We always, because Wales always had a bit of an identity issue, we tried to do things that were a little bit different. So when we came up with a campaign which was 2 hours and a million miles away, we dirtied up some Luton vans and drove them around the cities of England and wrote on them, clean air is just 2 hours away. That van appeared on the front pages of almost every national newspaper in the UK. We then got a bit silly and we started sponsoring workmen on the M25 and stuff, and that didn't work quite so well. But we always wanted to create stuff that made people talk, and boy, did this get people talking. This was a story about walking up to the top of Snowdon, and surprise, surprise, the mobile phone reception is not particularly good there. This ad, even today, is still very controversial because I was accused of frightening business away from investing in Wales. And another ad that we did at the time, and probably going back 10 years ago now, Castle 641 Starbucks 6. And I remember that when we did this, about a year after, we had to run the campaign again. And I said, well, you better just check now how many Starbucks there are in Wales. And within a space of a year, it had gone up to 11 Starbucks. So we had to change the ad. Now, 11 Starbucks in the space of a year, that's exponential growth. And so I predict that next year, we're going to have more bloody Starbucks in Wales than castles. And we're probably already there, actually. So I'm in a great position these days where I am able to talk to people who are real doers in terms of their countries and what they're achieving in their countries. And one of the most fascinating places that I've been to recently is a place called Erbil in Kurdistan. which is in northern Iraq. And I was having dinner there with an amazing guy who was one of the guys who actually was instrumental in setting up the autonomous region of Kurdistan within Iraq. He's now the Vice-Chancellor of the university in Erbil. And he was talking about how he set about working with others to create a government and to create an autonomous region within Iraq, which you're probably aware that the Kurds had, suffered terrible atrocities under Saddam Hussein. And actually, Liz, one of the things that they did was they set up the government there on the model of Quebec. And anyway, we're having dinner with him, and the doorbell rang, and his friend came in, and he said, "You've got to meet this guy." And his friend, whilst he was on the political wing of the PKK, the guy we were with, the other guy was on the military wing. And he had just come back from southern Iraq, where he had dug up the bodies of about 100 Kurdish prisoners who had died in the deserts of southern Iraq, and brought them home. He took a plane down there and brought them home, and that evening he came to have dinner with us. And these two guys talk about they'd actually set up a nation. They'd created a nation, which was incredibly humbling. Another place we're working with at the moment is Northern Ireland. A fascinating part of the United Kingdom, or the island of Ireland, whichever way you want to look at it. And if I talked earlier about getting people on side, well, one of the biggest challenges in a place like Northern Ireland is that they can't even agree the name of the place. But there's a tremendous enthusiasm to do things in Northern Ireland. The new generation that are growing up, that want to look to the future. And it's fascinating and a real privilege to be able to work with them on that. And if you think Northern Ireland is a challenge, we're also working for Cardiff City Football Club. I don't know how many football fans there are out there. I'm a Cardiff City supporter, and 2 years ago, the new owner came to the club and decided to change the colours from blue to red, and has created massive division. I mean, any sporting franchise, any sporting club, what you have to have is unity, and it's created tremendous division. You don't choose your football club. It's sort of handed down to you by your father and grandfather. And the colours and symbols of a club are very, very important. And you fall in love with your football club. And there's a lot of people that have fallen out of love. So it's been an interesting challenge working with Cardiff City as well, particularly as a Bluebirds fan that I am. People ask me what are some of the best examples of place marketing. Well, this is one of my favourites. Austin in Texas. Apparently, this is a great example of a brand, if you want to call it that developed from within. One of the guys who was chair of the local chamber apparently did an interview on radio and talked about we got to keep Austin weird, and it just developed a momentum all of its own, and it really is one of the strongest and most original place brands out there. And my personal favorite is Las Vegas. What happens here stays here. And this is a huge poster which is at the airport as you arrive in Las Vegas. It's a great one. So yeah, that's just a little introduction to myself and place marketing, and it's great to see you all in this small, clever country called Wales. As I said at the outset, I never imagined that I'd have the opportunity to talk at this event, but it's been great to do so, and thanks very much.